Jesus's birds.
Jesus' birds. I was hoping to say that right as we went live.
It was loading. It was loading.
Jesus' birds.
So hi folks, it is Sako and the Moon horror podcast. We are reviewing and comparing the first Candyman and then the 21 requel. Can you kind of go into what the heck a requel is?
Do you want to do the theme first? Do we have a theme for this one? Do we go for theme on this one, or do we just talk? It's not like we haven't done 3 of these episodes in 1 week, and I don't know how this works. Screw it. Screw the theme. We're already playing. All right, so here's what a requel is. A requel is a combination of a remake and a sequel.
Oh, okay.
Think Halloween. Think Scream from 2022, whatever it was. Think the upcoming movie, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, Bloodlines? Yeah.
No, that's Final Destination.
Oh.
Now, see, Final Destination is a sequel. It's a follow-up sequel. But like a requel kind of takes the first movie and reworks it like a remake would.
Yeah.
But the difference is
the story continues.
It's a continuing story. So whatever has happened previously is still canon. The Scream 5 is a requel. And Scream the franchise typically takes horror and turns it onto itself to where it is a reflection of horror at the time. Scream 4 was 10 years later, so it was kind of rehashing franchises that wait an unnecessary amount of time in order to make a sequel utilizing a younger cast but still bringing in legacy cast members. And Scream 5 was a requel, and that's why you have how it basically plays out the same way that Scream played out. But you still had characters like Dewey and Sydney and Gale. Candyman requel is essentially the first movie Candyman, but it is a continuing story where all the events that took place in the first, that's why this looks funny, while all the events that took place in the first one still happened. So that's what a requel is, essentially. It's a remake, sequel, hybrid thing.
Take a screenshot and send it?
Of what?
Your frozen screen.
Am I frozen? I'm moving on my
side. You are frozen.
Because I'm moving.
You are not moving. I'm frozen too. That's cool. Okay, yeah. We're good. It caught up.
All right, cool. Yeah,
it caught up. Okay.
Because you didn't stop moving and I didn't stop moving. Not for me.
Yay! Live. Woohoo!
I love live. This is why I love doing live. So yeah, we're covering the horror classic Candyman from 1992. And it's requel from 2021. And I felt like since we just did the episode on cryptids, these creatures of like fame and mythology almost, I feel like Candyman was definitely going to be like the right movie for it. But I really wasn't sure which Candyman to go with. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do this for the first time. Let's compare 2 different versions of the same movie. Essentially.
Indeed.
So, should we start off with what the gist of Candyman is, or do you want to just go right into the format?
I think we should possibly talk about the theme and the message and the backstory before we get into it.
Okay, so we're gonna we'll basically do this. I got you. I got this. So if you're new here, face my camera. So if you're new here, here's basically what this is going to work. Normally we give a score based in stars up to 4, and we have it in 4 different categories. It is production, writing, characterization, and theme. She would normally pop them up on the thing, but I'm controlling this right now. But because of this particular movie and this awkward format, we're probably still going to score them. But we're probably going to approach it a little bit differently. Don't ask me how. We'll figure it out on the fly. But we're going to go with the 4th category first. And I think Sako is highlighting how important the message behind this movie is. And I think it is worth addressing first. So quick synopsis of the movie, first and second. And I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. Let's see if I can give myself 2 minutes for this. Candyman, the first one, Candyman from 1992, is about a woman named Helen. And Helen is doing her thesis on urban legends, like modern urban legends. And the urban legend she kind of gets caught up on and caught up in is the legend of Candyman, who basically haunts and taunts with tricks and treats in this housing project known as Cabrini Green. She eventually summons Candyman, very Joe Hendry style, by saying his name, and then he appears. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But she summons Candyman, and then Candyman basically chooses her to be with him. And we go into the backstory of Candyman, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But that's the gist of Candyman. There's some other details, but again, we'll get into it in the story. Candyman 21 is sort of a long-range follow-up. Time has passed. Cabrini Green has been redone into condos, which is kind of what happened to the housing projects in the first movie. And in the course of this struggling artist gets caught up in the myth of Candyman and thinks that this becomes an inspired project subject for his art moving forward. It does, but he too summons Candyman, and Candyman has a certain liking to this particular artist, which we will connect the dots here in the course of the episode. And that's the gist of both movies. Hot damn, look at that. I did it in 2 minutes. Come on. Give me a goal. I got it. So I'll say this real quick just because I had to get the joke out of the way. Anyway, everything comes back to wrestling, and I could not help but notice the similarities between Candyman and Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry is a professional wrestler whose gimmick is from his theme song, which starts off by saying, "Say his name and he appears. I believe in Joe Hendry," which you can easily think. I love I taught you that. Which can easily be applied to Candyman. So what I want, this is what I'm challenging the internet to do. And Sako, if you can get this to clip out later, I don't care. Just do whatever you have to do. Okay. I would love for someone to Photoshop or whatever video edit. Instead of Joe Hendry, it's Candyman. I'd love that. You can send that to Sako in the Moon at gmail.com or just me. Send it to me, Dwan L. Hearnwrights at gmail.com. I want to see it. Put it online, tag me, tag us. Put the link in our comment.
Feel free to
whatever.
slice apart our videos.
I need someone to do this for me. The wrestling fan or horror fan in me.
We need a sound clip. I
need someone to Photoshop Candyman into the Joe Hendry theme song video. Wrestling fans know exactly what video I'm talking about, and they'll know exactly where to put them. Wrestling fans will know exactly what to do. I am counting on wrestling fans to do this for me.
Okay, you got to send this to all your wrestling fans.
All the peoples. Now that I've done all that and all that's out of the way, let's get into the message behind Candyman and what this is ultimately about. And I will touch on this because I feel like I'm already the one babbling. And Sako's going to get into more important notes later because that's what she's.
Am I?
I mean,
Am
probably.
I?
Probably are. This is what you do. It's one of the hats you wear, which is
It
funny.
is.
She's the wearer of all hats. The wearer of hats. I'm the one who actually wears a hat on every episode. So what we're looking at is this urban legend in the projects, right? And the theme is a reflection of how poorly the ghetto has always kind of been. It's one of those methods used by the man to separate and segregate and keep the part of the population they find undesirable to keep them away. So what they do, they over police, they over criminalize, and they keep these areas poor and run down and subjugate them. And it's terrible. And this is basically how they get through. The legend of Candyman was a black man who got wronged. He was beaten and abused and had his hand cut off and replaced with a hook, and it was covered by honey and left out for the bees. It was terrible what happened to the original Candyman. And this is how he died so vengefully, and he came back as this haunting spirit. And I think the overall message is to highlight the oppression that comes from things like gerrymandering, redlining, and overall racial oppression. And it is highlighted in the conditions that the people had to live in with Cabrini Green. And the things that happened there, and no one seemed to care. As we go into the first movie, we hear about the story of Ruthie Jean, who in character, in the movie, she was a character who was, we don't see her, but there's a story that she called 911. People thought she was crazy, so no one came to help her. Turned out she was being attacked by Candyman. And by the time the police showed up, because they didn't really care about her plight because of where she was, and she was found dead. And this kind of goes into things when we go into the second movie. It's a comparison. There's
gentrification.
There is gentrification, but one of the things that happens in the second movie, in the 21 version, there's a man who is kind of the role of Candyman in the streets, gave candy out to all the kids, kind of following the legend therein. And there was a young girl, a white girl. There's a lot of racial themes in these movies. So there was a white girl who was given a razor blade in her candy. And the police, because of Sherman's reputation of giving candy out to children, was basically stalked by the police. And when they finally found him, they beat him and killed him on the spot. And shortly after he died, more candy with more razor blades was found. And this wasn't a Candyman legend. They just got the wrong guy. They didn't jail him. They didn't give him due process. They didn't give him a trial. They just killed him right then and there. And they were wrong. And they wronged him, and they didn't care because it was a black man in the hood. And so that was kind of the backstory behind Sherman in the second movie. And all of these movies have that common theme of racial oppression and how there's an image of coming out of the dark and picking ourselves up. But have we really, in the eyes of those who are observing us? We see it a little bit in the second movie when he's got the art director who's like running the gallery, and he keeps kind of looking at the artist, and I'm avoiding his name on purpose right now. They're looking at the artist and just like, you should be lucky you have an opportunity. You should be lucky you have a chance here. And everything's about breaking past those kind of underlining racial barriers and how successful we actually are, despite how successful we might look. There are a lot of people who will look at black CEOs or black millionaires or black billionaires and use them as evidence that there is no such thing as racial oppression anymore, and do believe that is not the case. This episode is not about racial oppression. It's about movie review, so we won't go too deep into it. But just do please know that that is not the sign you think it is. And if you bring that up as evidence to someone who knows what they're talking about, you're going to get roasted. We're going to do that. We've practiced. We're going to get you. Please don't come to me with that. I will make your soul cry. But that is such a heavy theme, particularly in the second movie, because it does show Cabrini Green is now an upscale condo. There are black artists, successful black artists. There is black people who are living non-ghetto, poorly portrayed lifestyles, highfalutin type of lifestyles, and it looks like they've made it. But you see kind of how they're being treated and observed, and people are looking at them. There is that kind of like, you really can't get away from that. Even in the ending of the second one, when the police are trying to dictate how to spin the story of the ending, it's that same sort of police will tell the story they want to tell versus the story that took place. And this is the overall message and theme of the movie. That Candyman is an entity representing how oppression will not live, because Candyman lives. And if you try to get him, you're going to get God. Say my name and I'll appear. Though you got to say it 5 times for Candyman, only once for Joe Hendry. And I think that covers our last little block. I think that
sums it up quite well.
Thank you. We will save backstory for a little bit because there's a lot to put in that for as far as Candyman lore. But I am willing to throw, if that's part number 4, I'm willing to throw a vote already out there. I think they conveyed those themes of racial oppression very, very well without throwing it in your faces. There is the black artist going through it all with his black girlfriend and her black brother, who's in a interracial dating situation, in comparison to the way Helen was treated in the first movie by the people of Cabrini Green as a white woman in this ghetto. I think they highlight the differences, and they highlight the suffering of the conditions of such living arrangements. I think they covered all that pretty well. I'd be willing to give it a star for the 4th part. Do you have anything to add?
I agree. I think that there were some very clear realities in both movies that were, as far as I know, and I obviously I am not in that culture, but it seemed loyal, and I think it would be eye-opening for any person who is not black to kind of get a glimpse of what it's like to be black in America, especially in Chicago.
And it's more reflections, not so much specifically black, but it is a reflection of, like, an example of racial oppression. And while both movies, because Helen's partner for her thesis is also a black woman. So it does show this comparative that it's not exactly a black thing, but when you are in this space you are viewed a certain way. When you are, it's not just like an apartment complex, where you just pick a place to live because the rent was better or whatever. These are last options in some cases. When you have general oppression where for oppressive reasons you weren't able to get the education you wanted to, maybe the college didn't want someone like you on their campus, so you didn't get that full degree, and then maybe you didn't get that college that really good paying job because they didn't like your application or the name on the application, or maybe you were bypassed for the promotion despite how well you did on the job because they just couldn't see someone like you in upper management. Maybe your upper management job wasn't successful because the people under you didn't believe that you were good enough to lead them. Maybe whatever the situation was, maybe it's the opinions of society that led your partner, significant other, roommates, whatever, to suffer untimely fates. And these situations lead you to be in a situation where you have no other choice but to live in those types of housing situations, and anything can happen and put you there in a space like it. And when you have different levels of oppression all the way through, because again, sometimes these people were dealing with age discrimination, because sometimes you're dealing with people who are just too old to get a job of any sort, so this is just where they can afford to live, or maybe oppression because they're women, or maybe they're from outside the country, so this is just where they kind of have to live. There's a lot of types of oppression that impact the ghetto and housing projects, and I think it's a really good example of what the people there are generally dealing with. One of the things that Helen is dealing with when she gets there, took a breeding reading the first time through, is there are gangs outside. Yeah. And it's not like the gangs are there to torment everyone who lives there. Well, I'm sure that happened to some degree. They were, for lack of a better term, security, because they react to Helen because they assume that Helen is the police. She rolls up in here in her nice little jacket as a white woman in a nice little car. And they assume she's the police. Even so much as where they announced to the complex that, hey, the police are coming. So it's not so much that the gangs were doing something wrong themselves, but they were kind of protecting the people who were there, because in those cases, you have to do what you got to do to make the money. Obviously, if you had a lot of money coming in, you wouldn't be living there. So for what you got to do what you got to do, take care of your kid. Like we talked to Anime McCoy, and she was dealing with some stuff. She had gone through some struggles, and she just wants to take care of her son, her little kid, baby Anthony, who will absolutely definitely not hear about ever again in this movie. But yeah, that's pretty much the generalization of the theme, and I think it covered and conveyed that very well while not bypassing the story of Candyman.
I think that's fair. I think that is well put.
So for theme, I would be willing to give it a star.
For theme, I am willing to give it a star. If anything, I mean, I had been told stories, like horror stories, by my African American friends. And like I said, this seemed loyal.
Yeah.
Like this kind of lived up to those stories, and it was eye-opening that it hit Hollywood, that they made a movie, 2 movies about it.
A series of movies. There's like 4.
A series of movies, yes.
There's a Candyman 2 and a Candyman 3.
Which I'm going to try and watch.
I'm going to probably find them and I'm going to watch them because. But yeah, I've known some people who lived in those types of, and lived in those kind of housing projects. And again, they're good people. They're just people. They're no different than anybody else you run into on the street, and you probably run past them all the time and don't even know it. It's just circumstances and situations. I've known people who lived in some housing projects here in my hometown. For the record, not black. They were younger. They were white. They were women, and they just ran into some hard times. They ran into some situations, and that's where they ended up. It was just where they could afford to live. And that was just their circumstance. And eventually they worked their way out, just like you work your way out of an apartment to buy a house. So my last message on this would be don't judge people for where they live. Just because they live in a high rise or in the suburbs doesn't make them great people. And just because they live in the housing projects doesn't make them bad people. So let's just make sure that's clear. Now we can move on to things like production.
Okay. Let's see here.
And for those who might be wondering, we've spent a lot of time on talking about that because that is the theme of the movie. Yeah. That is the highlight, the primary theme of this movie was a horror movie used to convey one way or another the downtrend of racial oppression in the housing authority, things like that. It's the theme of the movie. If you've seen Candyman, you wouldn't have that question.
Okay, so within production, we have art direction, we have makeup and props, and we have cinematography.
And random thumbs up. That was Sako's computer reminding you to like our video. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe and hit all your notification bell to all, so that if we have a weird week like we did last week, you'll know when all of our episodes start popping up. That's what that thumbs up is for. Totally intentional.
Tell the algorithm that you want to see more of us.
Because we're dope.
Because we're dope. Okay, art direction. The Candyman's voice echoes through the ages.
Mm-hmm.
His voice.
Tony Todd.
Whew.
Tony Todd. The legend. Rest in peace, sir.
Rest in peace. But the voice through the beginning of the first movie and just repeated, like as he spout out essentially poetry.
Yeah.
The shadow puppets in the second movie were rad. I kind of liked.
Listen, that was one of my favorite parts of the second movie. They use, because as a requel, you kind of have to touch back on the old one, right? You have to kind of catch up the audience in case they didn't know there was an old one. Because with the example of like Halloween and Scream, and there's a few others, I can't think of them right now, other requels that have come out in the last 5 years or so, one of the signs of a requel is they don't mark themselves as requels. They give themselves the same old school name. Like they didn't call this Candyman 4. They called it Candyman, which was the name of the first one. Same thing with Halloween. They didn't call it Halloween 400,000. They called it Halloween. They didn't call it Scream 5. They called it Scream. Even though the one before it was Scream 4 and the one after it was Scream 6, this one was talking about requels that used the same name. Even the in-universe movie Stab was Stab, not Stab 8. It was Stab.
Right.
But that's one of the highlights is that's why we have to distinguish the year that we're talking about, the 92 versus the 21. But in that second version, in the retelling of the story, both in the opening of the movie and when the brother is telling the story of Candyman, they use these weird stick shadow puppets, which I thought was incredibly creative. Because I can't think of any situation where I would have thought to use that type of puppeteering. It's one thing to use shadows. It's one thing to use puppets. To use the puppets in shadow, like it's so well done, and just the execution of that was flawless, absolutely flawless.
Yeah. Yeah. Makeup and props, lots of blood and gore. Well done. I mean, not as much as like, Halloween or Texas Chainsaw or anything like that, but there was plenty of blood.
There was,
was
particularly in the second one.
Particularly in the second one.
There's one kill in the second one that I cannot. I'm saving for a moment just to talk about with the cinematography because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to about in the cinematography of the second one.
Me too.
I love the second one, but the first one, and I have a question for you. We can get into the second one here in a second. Talking about the second one. What was your thoughts on the fashion? Mind you, this is 1992 when this movie comes out, so it's probably being framed like it's in 1988, 89. It's the late 80s and early 90s. What about the fashion on Helen with those big ass shoulders?
Yep.
Man, if you shout out to 80s fashion.
Shout out to 80s fashion.
80s fashion, man. It's crazy. But I love it because it does give you a hint of Chicago in the 80s where it was, the sort of like the B-boy style of dress. Once you got to Cabrini Green and you saw the younger black kids, that kind of hip Funkmaster Flash, Run DMC inspired wear. In comparison to just a really nice casual 70s type of dress that kind of carried over into the 80s a little bit in the major cities like New York and Chicago. I love that. It felt like Chicago. It felt. By the way, I love the city of Chicago. I absolutely love Chicago.
Me too. And I like the food as well.
Food's up, yeah.
Food is wonderful. Do you have anything to say about the makeup and the props?
I have more so a question for you.
Okay.
The artist in the second movie, and I promise, guys, we won't only going to be vague on that for like a little while longer.
Yeah.
Wait till we get to the writing part. We'll get it all into it. We'll get all into it. The artist in the second, as an artist, what were your thoughts on his art and how he was interpreting Candyman? Because you've recently done a gallery show. He does a gallery show.
I have. I thought that piece was very powerful. When you open the mirror and you see the black light paintings that he did about his past and what went down. The critic tearing it apart was.
Yeah, I wanted your thoughts on that. It's more of a writing thing, but it fits with the art theme. So I want to go into that.
I know what it feels like to have a critic or someone like that critique your work in a negative light.
Mm-hmm.
And like my final year in art school, art is subjective despite the urge they have to try and make it objective.
Yeah.
I failed my portfolio review like 4 times. And it took me going to we had a teacher who was called the type Nazi.
Okay.
And she was technically sound. She was very extremely knowledgeable about the art and was very honest about how she saw your work.
Yeah,
And so it took me going to someone who would see me objectively, see my skill, just like my subject matter aside,
mhm.
and and that's what it took for me to graduate.
And I feel like that's something that as independents we really have to deal with,
Hmm.
because it's one thing to go to college and get an English degree, and you know you're you spend all of your time reading Hawthorne and Shakespeare and E. Cummings and all these classic, Dickens, and you're familiar with the words of Chaucer and things of these nature, and your writing and your judgment of what writing should be is based on that. And one of the things I love about horror is that we don't really fuck with all that noise. Horror is such a vast space. And for the independents out there who watch our show, please know that if you don't do things technically right, you have a space in writing. There's room on the shelf for you and for what you're building. Because honestly, we need variety. We need some unique stuff. Um, that's
We
just what
do
that's just what
inclusive.
yeah, that's just what writing art needs to understand the rules. I would tell you to go learn the rules, because you need to know what all the rules are and understand them perfectly so that you can properly break them and then ignore them completely.
And figure out which rules work for you
Yeah.
and which rules don't.
And shatter the ones that don't. You have our
Hmm.
permission to break the fucking rules. Independent indie artists are rule breakers by definition.
By definition.
We are rule breakers. Rule breaker t-shirt coming eventually. We'll decide.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I wanted to definitely ask you. I love the art. Um,
I thought the art was great, especially the three portraits when he's like losing his mind.
when he paints the Candyman of the past, I love the texture in that art.
I I thought it was great.
The art in
And
itself,
and
if
he's
you
trying to like
appreciate art,
cover
you're like,
it up with he's like, "Oh no, I've made a mistake. I need to cover these
it's
up
like you can't
because
see these.
you
You
can't
can't see. And I
see
think that
these."
was more so him understanding that he seems fucking nuts. And he's like, "Don't look at this, you'll judge me." And she did,
She did.
because he was
Yeah.
losing it. And granted, yeah, rightfully so, he was off the wall. But there's a kill in there. So I want to get into cinematography before we go to vote. The cinematography in the second one in particular. The first one I will say was pretty run of the mill. It
Sure.
was it was an early 90s horror movie. And by the way, 90s horror movies need to be distinguished between early 90s and late 90s. Early 90s, you get things like Candyman. Late 90s, you get things like Scream. And these are stylistically different movies. Just
Wildly different.
the style of the early 90s feeds off the late 80s. That's one. And then the style that you get into when you get around the later Freddy movies and into the Scream movies, leading to Urban Legend and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and those, even into Final Destination, those are different stylistically. Beforehand, that early 90s, 80s, even 70s level of cinematography was pretty basic, I mean, it fit. It did what it was supposed to do. Nothing extravagant, but also nothing wrong. It was technically sound. It conveyed what needed to be conveyed in the moments. Um, I don't remember anything that jumped out at me as intriguing. There was, pullback when there needed to be good pullback. Like we were seeing the mural of Candyman with his mouth open over the hole in the wall. I love shots like that. But in the second one, the use of, and I just love how you can use your frame and make things, there's a lot of far away shots. There was him crossing the Dearborn Avenue Bridge over the Chicago River where it's so far away, you just see the bridge in the city. And then as they slowly start to zoom in, I even started following the wrong guy at first, because you think the guy is coming in from the left to the right. And that's the person you're supposed to be following as you're zooming into the bridge. And then you realize, no, the artist is coming in from the right to the left, which again is abnormal because in America we read from left to right. So a lot of these things are designed to go from left to right. That's how our brain is trained to look. It even got me. But I loved shots like that. And then there was when he's leaving the critic's house near later part of the movie, he's leaving the critic's condo. And we zoom out and we see him lead through the window. And we're zooming out. And as we're zooming out, Candyman gets her. But you don't see him unless there's a reflection, because his whole thing is mirrors. So it's just her getting killed and then lifted and then up against the wall and then slid across the glass. And you just get this stripe of blood on the window. While you see all these other lights on and all these other apartments, and everyone's just kind of living their life while this woman is just dying in her apartment right there in the center of the screen. That is masterful. I use the word masterful a lot because I love it. I just think it's great. That's the kind of stuff I want to get to eventually. So
right on.
I love the production of this, particularly the second
the
movie.
21.
The first one was good. It did what it was supposed to do. It conveyed things it was supposed to. It moved. Cinematography. It did what it's supposed to do. But there was unique stuff in 21 that I still haven't seen in other movies. And the use of space like that is being done a lot more in modern movies, modern horror. We are using zoom, panning out and using size relative on screen a lot to convey message in films. We talked about it in The Substance. We apparently we've been talking about it a lot last week, but we saw it in The Substance and we see it here in Candyman 21.
Absolutely. I do have to warn people who have trigger warning, like triggers. There is a trigger warning. The dog does die.
The dog does die. Helen
is committed. That I found that kind of.
There was. I'll talk a little bit more about Helen getting committed in the writing. In 1992, everyone smokes everywhere. Yes, there were no smoking bans anywhere. So it is kind of weird because in Louisville, we have a smoking ban where we don't smoke inside anymore. And that's even weird for me.
When DC did that.
When I leave town and I go somewhere else and people just open a pack of cigarettes and start smoking, I'm a non-smoker. So it's a little jarring for me a little bit. I'm just like, oh, you're smoking. I'm not at home right now. This isn't Louisville. They don't have the same rules.
They don't have the same rules. Yeah.
And even when Louisville passed that law, I was like, I only really catch this at the bar because most restaurants at the time had smoking sections or non-smoking sections. But at the bar, I'm like, listen, I'm a non-smoker, but I'm going outside or I'm going to a place where they're smoking. I know it's there. I'm walking into this intentionally. It's fine. We don't need a ban. But they did, and you get used to that. So seeing everyone smoke all over the place, that's
in restaurants, like
it'll throw you
and not necessarily in a smoking section either.
Yeah, they just smoked.
They just smoked after dinner, right at the table.
You have to remember this comes out in 92, and again, I'm not 100% sure what year this is supposed to be.
If it's 89, it makes more sense.
It feels like 89. It does feel like a late 80s, an 88 or an 89. And again, there's a little bit more to go into about that in the writing section. But yeah, I feel like it's technically placed in the late 80s.
In the first movie, there were flashes of Candyman imagery when she's when she's questioning her sanity,
Yes.
that I thought was very nicely done.
Yes.
So you could pause the scene and you could get lucky and actually see some of the Candyman art that has been featured in previous movies, in the current movie, and I thought that was great.
I don't think movie editors get enough credit.
Yeah, for real.
Because I'm telling you, our movie editor for Hallowed Hills, fantastic guy. He made beautiful mountains out of molehills with his editing skills, and you wouldn't believe how new to editing that he is when you watch our work.
That's
it's
awesome.
Fantastic. John's great. Shout out to John Mattingly.
The way he looked, like the Candyman looked in the second movie, was inspired by the murals in the first movie.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that if you watch them.
So he's not wearing the fur. He's in the tan.
Yellow. Yeah, it's got the yellow jacket. There's like a little fur lining, but it's not quite the same jacket. It's imagine if someone was taking on the role of Candyman. I feel like in the first movie, you're dealing with the entity that is Candyman.
And we talk about it in the plot when we talk about writing, but but
what I was saying was you get that Candyman, and then you see like in the 21 version, especially as we're going through the art of the artist, that there are multiple Candymen black men who have fallen equally victim to some sort of oppression, and they come back in the realm of Candyman, in the space of Candyman. They fit the spiritual mold of Candyman, and so you end up dealing with multiple Candymen over the years. But again, there's some more writing notes to that in the next section.
Yes, indeed. So do we give for production, do we give it a star? I say yes.
Question: are we giving Candyman as a franchise stars, or are we giving stars to each movie? Doesn't change my vote.
It kind of doesn't change my opinion, really. So I would say just the both of them like together. If there are caveats, then we can discuss it. But
yeah, I'm cool either way because it's not going to change my vote. The production clearly gets a star. The first one, there was a lot of good things done. I do have questions about the passage of time. That's more. I mentioned that
in the plot.
That's more of a writing thing, so I'm gonna get that in a second. But the way they convey passage of time from shot to shot was good, given the writing. But you cannot deny the production in the second movie, from the puppets to the lighting to the using of perspective and size.
I noticed a little bit of Kubrick inspiration in both movies. There's this perspective shot that Kubrick was particularly fond of, and there were a couple of times where they feature that shot briefly, but they flash it on screen for a few seconds, and basically it's an establishing shot for when she goes to the one that's sticking out in my head is when she goes to the projects and she's looking down the hallway, and there's that hallway shot that Kubrick was so fond of.
Yeah.
So I liked that as well.
So yeah, definitely a star. We're definitely giving it a star here. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to writing. The dialogue was believable. Each character voice and language, like the way the like it when writing there is a voice.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of your style,
Yeah.
right? That style is assigned to a character, and I felt like every character was wildly different. There was
Yes.
no repeats, there was no unnecessary um, roles.
Nothing
Like
was generic.
nothing was generic.
I think that was really important, especially given the theme of the movie. I think it was important to distinguish in both of them. Uh, not all Black people talk alike. They're not all the same. Not everybody's doing the same thing everyone else is doing. And the same for white characters. But if you notice, there aren't a lot of white characters in the second movie. There are some here and there. They're basically in the art space. But in the first movie, there was a few at the university, and that just kind of highlights more because of the theme of the movie. But I think the way I used to say it to you is if something is said by the character, it's a character trait. If it's something said by all the characters, it's a writer's trait. It's something that the writer themselves puts into everything. Maybe a special way of saying hi. If one character does it, it's a character trait. If every character seems to do it, that's because the writer does it. I can almost guarantee you. For me, it was the word really. I use really a lot. And I had noticed in some of my editing that a lot of my characters said really a lot. So that's how you knew it was an art. It was an artist thing. But to make the point, there isn't a lot of uniform dialogue. Everyone kind of has their voice, and it feels like you're talking to different individuals throughout the whole thing. One thing I did like was the artist, as he's descending, his speech gets faster.
It does.
And it gets crazier without getting disconcerting. Like, it doesn't get confusing. It just sounds zanier. It's delivered zanier. All of that has to do with the acting. I think the acting of the artist was fantastic. And the way he delivered those lines really sold those lines. In the first movie, I felt like Helen sounded and felt really academic at first. And then you realize it's because she's a college student and she's trying to do this thesis and she's presenting herself as such. And so everything just really kind of fits into the mold where it's supposed to be. And I did like the way the dialogue set itself. One thing I did really like about the writing was the telling of the Cabrini Green, the Candyman story, and Candyman 21 by the brother and Troy. I think it was Troy, the brother Troy, which was off. The story was wrong because he's basically telling the story of Candyman 92, but he doesn't tell it correctly. Like, his story is not a synopsis of what happened, which is good. It's a good thing to be wrong because he's not recapping the previous movie. He's telling the lore and the story the same way it would have been told in the community over all those years. It would have gotten shifted. The perspective would have changed. And the opinions of things and the viewpoints, the vantage point would have changed as the story is being told 20, 30 something years later. Because mind you, 1992 is 34 years ago almost.
Right.
So it's like 33, 20, like 30. That's a really long time. I shouldn't have done the math. I really regret that now. Um, let me have a moment. But that story would have changed being told orally as an oral tradition in that community over that span of time. How you remember it, how people from there would change the story up. So I love that attention to detail. As a writer, it is just as easy to watch Candyman 92 and write down exactly what happened and let that be the backstory. It's just as easy. But to change it in just the right ways, that is a skillful writer. That is a proper writer who knows the story he's actually telling.
Right.
And that's very important in a situation like that.
In the beginning of the first movie, talking about plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone says his name. They're just throwing it out there. Is everyday speech, and then by the second movie, it's like,
yeah, and it's so good because the events of the first one take place canonically in the second one, so people have learned the lesson. It's like, we're not doing that. Don't do that here. Don't do that.
Yeah, the origin stories differ a little bit, but the Candyman had a name which they reveal in the.
It's Daniel Rubite, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But it was Daniel. Candyman's name is Daniel, and he was the original Candyman. And I kind of already shared what happened to him, and it's they kind of go into that. And this is stuff that comes probably from Candyman's 2 and 3. I was talking to my buddy Jason William Allen, who's a huge fan of Candyman. And he was talking about how there's so much more story and backstory in Candyman's 2 and 3. The sequels don't get enough credit. So I might go back and just watch those to get more of that backstory. But they tell the story well enough that basically he was a slave who was good at art. Eventually he was good at art, and he would do art for white people, and he fell in love with a young white lady, and that was a big huge no-no. And so they killed him for it. They basically lynched him and killed him, and they just abused him. It was terrible. And that is kind of the tragedy that took place that created the entity that is now recognized as Candyman. Sherman's Candyman, same thing. The Sherman's Candyman from 21, which is interesting because that took place in, did I write it in? 77. All right. So
the very beginning did. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're watching the second Candyman 21, the events of the opening take place in 77. So that was Sherman, right? That was Sherman, who was a guy who gave out candy. He was wrongly accused. He was killed by the police. And became Candyman. Because what you see is that there are people in the community who assume the role of Candyman because of the legend from Daniel's Candyman. And so technically the opening of Candyman 21 takes place before the events, I assume, of Candyman 92.
Right.
So that would make a lot of sense that the artistic direction of the design of the costumes in the 77 scenes.
That's interesting.
I
make
agree.
sure I'm on the right track, could you tell me a bit more about what you're thinking regarding the timeline of the Candyman movies and the...
That was my phone. So if you don't think that your phone is listening to you while you're talking, I guarantee you it is, because that was my phone asking me questions about what I just
on the iPhone. There is a class action lawsuit.
There is
that I got. Yeah.
So Yeah, notice how my phone, I was nowhere near. I was not touching my phone at all. It's over there. Anyhow, I'm glad to know my phone thinks my opinion is interesting. But the Candyman of 77 looks like the art, the murals done in 92. And it would make sense that if Sherman was the most recent iteration of sorts of Candyman, it would make sense that the art direction in 92 would look like Sherman. Even though the Candyman in the 92 version wasn't Sherman, it was Daniel.
Yeah.
So then it goes into some of these writing questions as into if all this stuff is canon with each other, why is it that the events that took place in the 92 version of Candyman, why wasn't that Sherman?
Right.
Why was that Daniel? Why wouldn't it have been Sherman? Because Sherman would have died prior to that. So why wasn't it Sherman? And I feel like it's one of those things that, like, okay, you're thinking too hard about it. But at the same time, everything's canon. So it all matters.
It all matters. Congruency.
If you're going to make it separate, make it separate. Halloween did that. Halloween made it very clear that some of the things that become established in like Halloween 2 and 3, or more like 2 and 4, they're not canon any longer. This is a direct sequel from the original movie, and therefore the sequels to the original movie don't count. So no H2O, no Resurrection, no Halloween, no Season of the Witch, no Curse of Michael Myers. So the cousin, the Lori being the sister, none of that takes place in Halloween in the requel. It's established. So if you're going to have a situation like that where certain things are not going to be canon, you might want to establish that. Keep that in mind if you're writing things like a series, or if you're picking up where someone else left off. Like if you're going to do like a pick up a franchise that you have the rights to, and that maybe went to public domain, be familiar with the material to know that someone is going to ask those questions. You should have an answer for it. Also, let me ask you this. How did you feel about the passage of time in the first one?
I was about to mention that.
I figured it was about time for that. It is.
I thought that it was very loosey-goosey. Like either it was moment to moment or it was week to week.
I'll let you talk about it because we're on the same page. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's this. So she gets knocked in the eye.
Yes, by a man who's in the social role of Candyman. So he wasn't an entity or a ghost or a demon or anything like that. He was just a guy who wore a big jacket and carried a hook. So he was in the social role of Candyman, more like a gang member kind of guy. And he was just kind of terrorizing the area as Candyman, but not the ghost Candyman. He's basically the Candyman we're dealing with the first half of the first movie. So he corners her and leaves her for dead, and she gets this big old knot on her eye.
And in the next scene, it's a little purple.
Yeah,
just a tiny bit. Like it's just a little bit of eyeshadow, like on her cheekbone. And I was like, holy cow, how much time was supposed to have passed?
And that's the problem I had. Me and Sako had discussed this kind of a little bit beforehand. I'm like, that's 2 weeks at least worth of healing. Minimum. That's 2 weeks worth of healing.
But the scene
swollen shut to where it's just slightly bruised here on the skin, like just right here. That's at least 2 or 3 weeks worth of healing.
Right. But the scene that, and I mentioned this in the pacing, was the scene where she is having that relationship with her husband, that honeymoon sort of relationship.
Yeah, that's sort of like this really weird
It
side
seems like a
story.
non sequitur until the end.
Yeah, it matters. It seems insignificant, but it does matter.
It is
The
Chekhov's
secondary
gun.
story
Yeah.
of her and her marriage, and it's established very early on. She pops into his class, and he's talking to a group of students, but one seems to really have his attention, or Stacy,
Mhm.
and you already know that Stacy. She looks like she's gonna be one of those. She's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
But going back to the subject of the passage of time, which this kind of goes into the pacing, because this is how the movie gets paced. I don't know how long this all takes place. This is a period of time that is undescribed. When we get to the scene where she is arrested and she is strapped down, she gets in that night from being arrested. She's strapped down, and Candyman comes to visit her. People put her to sleep or whatever, and then she wakes up a month later. She wakes up from her coma, I guess. I don't know. Just whatever it is. It was long enough for them to bathe her, change her clothes, and she wakes up and goes to see the doctor, and a month has passed. And she's shocked. She doesn't know how much time has passed. She's like, a month? And it's like, yeah, it's been a month. So now you're like, it was 2-3 weeks here, and it was a month there, and all these things have happened, and all this time is passing. And so you're like, how much time is it taking for this to happen in universe? You know what I mean? So I thought that was kind of weird with the pacing. The time things.
However, it's the drive of the main character that moves the story, right? So every scene, every beat has a point. There was no extraneous information. There was no extraneous, like, it didn't. So Quentin Tarantino, right, has tons of extraneous information, tons of extraneous
conversation for no reason, which I do enjoy, but it's very Tarantino.
Right.
If you don't know what we're talking about, think Pulp Fiction. When they show up to the apartment in the beginning, there's the car scene, which is kind of a passage of time as they're driving. You don't want them driving in silence. That makes sense. But then when they get upstairs, they're like, we got a couple minutes. And they just kind of step away from the door and just have a conversation, which doesn't really amount to much. It does, because it has to do with the boss, whatever, doing stuff. But it's just unnecessary. It doesn't really matter in the conversation overall. You can convey it later on. And it's weird that Tarantino does it. But I like it. It's a Tarantino thing, and I enjoy it.
I wasn't saying that I didn't enjoy it.
No, you're definitely telling the difference. Is like,
but there is a difference. That I think somewhere there has to be a director's cut
of the first Candyman,
of either the first or that 21. I gotta turn it off when I'm doing these things.
It's funny to me. I enjoy it. But no, you're right.
Okay, it's off.
But no, you're right. There are definitely. I would love to see some behind the scenes, deleted scenes. Even better, and this is for all the writers and particularly screenwriters. Look for the script, because a lot of times in a lot of movies, the script will include scenes that eventually get cut, and sometimes they should have stayed. Sometimes they're better off gone. But read a script, man. Back to the Future script's really good. Midsummer's really good because of the.
I had kids. I had the kids script.
I have not yet seen Kids. I wanted to see Kids when Kids came out because it got that rating. It was the first time I ever heard of NC-17.
Yep.
And I had never heard of the rating, and Kids was always that movie, but I never saw it.
The one that got away, as it were.
More or
Like,
less, yeah.
I stumbled on it on Cinemax.
Remember Cinemax? How old are we? Sorry.
When Cinemax was a channel you had to pay for. And
not a streaming service. No.
Not the streaming service.
You paid for the channel didn't work. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You kids have no idea.
So, yeah, the contrast between like Tarantino's work, for instance, which reminded me, and the conciseness of the movies, both of them, really. There were no extraneous scenes. There were no.
But I do think that they aired out things a little bit more in the second one.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little bit more getting to know the artist as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you this, and now we'll get into why I called him the artist this whole time. How masterful was it to put the twist ending of the second movie in the literal beginning of the movie? Like, it was right there in front of you the literal entire time. So for those who don't know, one of the big plots is at some point in time, Helen in the first movie is accused of stealing a baby, right? Candyman did it, but she's being framed for it. And it's little baby Anthony. It's little baby Anthony. That's what he's referred to as baby Anthony. Now, the mother is known as Anna Marie McCoy. That's her name. That's her character's name. In the second movie, the artist's name is Anthony McCoy.
Yep.
And then you later on find out that the reason why he was essentially chosen, where Candyman latched onto him the way that he did, not just to like attack him or torment him, but to recruit him, was because Anthony McCoy, the artist, was the baby who was kidnapped in the first movie, the one chosen by Candyman. The name was right there the whole time. It was right there. Any fan of Candyman, anyone who just knew the character's name well enough, would have known that from Jump Street. But somehow, it didn't click. I had a couple other friends watching Candyman 2, the second Candyman, while I was watching it. And they're like, oh, shit, it's the baby. He's the baby. It's like, he was the baby from the first one. They're like, how did I not know it? I'm like, he's got the name Anthony McCoy. That's baby Anthony from Anna Marie McCoy. How do you not know it? Also in the credits, Vanessa Williams, not to be confused with Vanessa L. Williams, but Vanessa Williams is the actress that played the mother in both movies.
Which I thought was epic.
It was, and that's one of the reasons that should, again, if you knew who
also
that
Black Don't Crack, holy cow.
Unless it shatters, like me.
Disagree.
But that is one of the things. It's telling in the credits. If you know who the Vanessa Williams character was, you're like, ooh, that in the credits, along with learning his name was Anthony McCoy, should have given away the ending, and somehow it doesn't. You literally say, here's the ending at the beginning, almost in a Midsummer kind of way, but even more obvious than in Midsummer, which, if you don't know, has a mural in the beginning that literally tells the entire story of the movie from Jump Street, like in the opening credit scene. It's crazy. But side note, bonus fact, if you remember in the early 90s, when Vanessa L. Williams goes to get into like acting and singing, I think when she did this song for Pocahontas, she was just Vanessa Williams, and she was forced to change her name from Vanessa Williams to Vanessa L. Williams, because if you're a SAG actor, you have to have like a registered name. That's your name. This way, the identities don't get crossed. You don't have two Matt Damons. There's got to be different somehow.
Right.
I think this might be the same reason why Michael B. Jordan is Michael B. Jordan, as opposed to just Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan, the athlete, did Space Jam.
Right.
So Michael Jordan, if I'm assuming that's his actual name, Michael B. Jordan couldn't just be Michael Jordan because he had to be Michael B. Jordan, whether his middle name starts with a B or not. Honestly, I like it better if it doesn't. I'm gonna look it up here in a second, because that would just say like he's the second Michael Jordan to be in acting, and it's that kind of thing. So that is the Vanessa Williams that's essentially made Vanessa L. Williams add the L to her name.
Nice little
bonus there. Little understanding of how acting works. I'm gonna look at Michael B. Jordan, the middle name.
Okay. How do we feel about the writing? I thought the writing was great. It was very concise. It was very action oriented, and it was kind of my jam.
Yeah, I really liked the writing. The pacing was a little weird for me in the first movie. The
pacing was a little weird, but
I can look past. I mean, it's one of those things that's a glaring mark. It does stand out. It doesn't ruin the movie. It just moves the movie awkwardly. Because I would like it if there was just one. It could have been like 1-2 second spot in between scenes. Show me a calendar. Show me a clock. Show me a sunrise, sunset. Show me some passage of time. Something that indicates the passage of time. I would have liked that. But interestingly, with this comparison, 21 does such a great job of keeping the overall Crucible short. The time span is essentially short. Everything's kind of happening very quickly, span of time. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of makes up for it. But it does, almost by comparing the two, it does kind of highlight that pacing problem a little bit more.
Yeah.
But as far as the dialogue and plot, it overrides the pacing. 2 out of 3 on that. So yeah, I'll give it a star on that.
I give it a star. Yeah. We're over time, but I don't care. We're gonna keep going. Characterization. The casting. We talked a little bit about the casting.
To give Vanessa Williams back was important. Mm-hmm. I think it could have been done without her, but it was done so much better with her. So you can always tell any story with anyone, but having that connection to the first movie was important. It's a shame we couldn't get Tony Todd back. I think he had passed.
No, they did. The last scene in the 21 movie.
That he pops in for like a literal half second. He says like a line, but I think at that point in time he was sick, maybe. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't really there. You know what I mean? But I wish instead of having the new Candyman as Sherman, I wish we could have had Candyman. But again, you needed to have the establishment of a new Candyman to tell the story of Anthony becoming the new Candyman, which happens at the end of the second movie. Anthony McCoy fulfills his destiny to become the new Candyman. And so I'm gonna be honest, I would like to have a sequel to that movie.
Yeah, me too.
I want a sequel. I want to see Anthony McCoy as the new Candyman in play. And that goes a lot to the acting of that actor. I didn't write it down. Did I? I did not.
Okay.
But the whole cast is fantastic. Shout out to the brother of the girlfriend for being a clearly queer character without being an overly queer character. Like representative, but not to the point where it's like poking fun.
Right.
It's very realistic.
It's very realistic.
And
Yeah.
I just love that portrayal. There's obviously some internal Black community kind of things, and the Black community as a whole is still dealing with full acceptance of things that challenge Black manhood. But I love how this space normalizes, queer folks in that space. So kudos to the acting, the writing, and I'm curious if that was something that was originally in the movie, because there is nothing inherently queer about his interaction with anyone besides his boyfriend.
Right.
So it's not like you needed a queer character for a setting or anything like that. It was just the brother who just happened to be queer, who just happened to be gay. And I don't know if that was like an original writing thing, or if that was just the actor who
Or
did a great
maybe
job
it
with the
was
character. And it's
casting.
like, well, yeah, like if he and writers, directors, and people, producers, don't be afraid to do that. If you have might just be a generic couple in your script, but you have a really great queer actor, and they're like, I wouldn't be dating a woman, I'd be dating a man. And it's like,
okay,
all right, cool, we'll cast you a guy. And that it'll help the actor feel seen, it'll make the character feel more natural. They did the same thing, a similar thing in Scream, the requel, where Tara and Amber, I think, were originally supposed to be a couple, but they became best friends because I think that there was too much love story, and they worked better as friends. Not like a drawing away from the gay thing, but story wise, it played better. And I agree, it wouldn't have played as well if they were a couple.
Right on. Consistency. I thought Growing Up the Baby was brilliant.
It was
like the whole Next Generation sort of deal was.
It connects the films. It connects the films, and it, in a sense, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it unifies the franchise. It's like takes this into the movie and this into the franchise, and just like and sticks them together and unifies the franchise. That was a fantastic idea, and the characters played into that so well.
The evolution of both Helen and Anthony were, I thought they were expertly done.
Yeah. Do you want to go into how maybe you felt about Helen's progression as she dealt with the subplot, the sub story with her husband and such?
Okay, so my husband calls it the firewall. There are plenty. My husband is a college professor, and there are plenty of hot students like walking around. He's like, nope, these are my kids. That there is no sexual attraction, like that. Just no.
When I asked you that, I totally forgot that your husband was a college professor. But so, that made me asking you even more poignant, but I absolutely forgot. It was not intentional.
So culturally, it is a big no-no to date your students, even in college.
It's a conflict of authority. Yeah,
it is. So that is, and him having the remorse Trevor having the remorse at the end of the first movie. Like, no, that was his wife. Like, they had a life together. Like, he threw it all away for this
Threw it all the way.
bitch, for this bitchy student who was obviously
What a
bitchy.
bitch. What a bitch at the end of that movie. She's already moved in. Helen's dead. What a bitch to just be so mad while your boyfriend, husband, whatever, is grieving in the bathroom to his dead wife, and you're just throwing meat around.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, first of all, how much does that steak, even in 1992, costs? You don't just throw away chunks of meat like that just around the room. The fuck is wrong with you?
Exactly. Exactly.
Crazy. Watch
So,
that ending scene, guys, because of the 92 movie. Like, she's an absolute bitch for no reason.
for no
whatsoever.
reason.
Just because she's young and she wants her way, and she's like, I got my man now. And it's
Yeah.
just make dinner. Just
make dinner. Be nice.
I'm not saying that because she's a woman. I'm saying that because that's actually actively what she was doing in the kitchen.
That was
She was
actively what she was
So
doing.
I'm just saying, just go do what you're doing. I heard that after I said it. I heard it.
So the evolution of both Helen and Anthony were expertly done. Even the Candyman himself, he evolved as the story progressed. It became less about dodging him and more about embracing him, which I make the equivalency to the Babadook. Just embracing the villain or the antagonist and making a deal, right?
Yeah.
So,
because I feel like the Candyman he's haunting to anyone from outside of Cabrini Green, but in Cabrini Green, he held a role, right? He held status, and there was a point where obviously he holds enough status to where people are imitating him and carrying on that role just in life. That was demonstrated at least twice. Once with Sherman before they killed him, and then with the guy who beat up on Helen. So he had a role. He had a social role to those people.
Yep.
And that's how you become a legend.
It's how you become a legend. POV. Helen in the first movie, Anthony in 21, but it flicks to the girlfriend at the end of 21.
I think it's fair enough to say that it's kind of both of them because they're both. It is primarily Anthony in the second one. It's definitely primarily Anthony. But you do get a perspective of this because she's experiencing Anthony experience Candyman. And so it's to get, once you get inside Anthony's head, not so much an unreliable narrator, but he does become the guy who is descending. So you need a perspective of the guy descending to see exactly how far he's descending.
Right.
There's a certain point where she's the one kind of keeping him up to date on things. Hey, you got to be at your mother's. Hey, we have this dinner. And then there's one particular point where she's like, don't fuck this up. He's like, no, I'll be fine. She's like, no. I said, don't fuck this up for me. And that's where you're like, you are representing me in this space, which is a regular relationship kind of thing, particularly in their dynamic. Because she's being seen positively in the art world. And he's kind of a fly-by-night almost kind of dude who did some cool stuff in the past. But to use that dynamic to show how your dissension in the madness is impacting the people closest to you. Now we're all in your spiral. We're all falling down your whirlpool. And it's there's such good movies. And they're stylistically different. The 92 one
they are
fits the mold of the time. Um,
Do you
and
know? I didn't look it up. I should.
what?
But do you know if they were directed by separate people?
I think so. I want to say that I know. I think Clive Barker was either director or producer for the first one, which checks out. It really does check out. It's a very Clive Barker movie. But I think the second one, the 21 one, was directed by a woman. And I want to say that because I think I had this Candyman as a March watch in movie commentary. She's looking it up.
I am.
Like my phone didn't throw that out there. Hey Google, who's the director of Candyman 1992?
Bernard Rose. But Clive Barker.
Titled Katie Man.
Not Katie Man. Candyman. Dumbass.
So Bernard Rose did the first one. Clive Barker helped write it. And then this one. Naya DaCosta.
That sounds about right.
But Jordan Peele helped write it.
Yes.
And Wynn Rosenfeld.
And Jordan Peele involved in any kind of a movie, particularly as we're talking about black spaces, that the name is getting bigger and bigger for Jordan Peele. It's getting bigger and bigger. And I'm loving it.
It is.
I'm here for
I
all.
love it. I love it.
This is Get Out, Us, Nope.
Them.
Did he do them? Was he part of them?
I was pretty sure that was his fourth.
No, let's see. He did Get Out, Us, Nope. And what was the other one he did?
Was it not them?
I think them was something different. I think them is...
Here, let me look. Wendell and Wild was his... He wrote Wendell and Wild.
You might be thinking of Him. That hasn't come out yet.
Him came out.
Is Him out?
Yeah. Battlestar Galactica.
Nope. Him is released September 19th of this year.
No, that was it. That was all he did. He's got the upcoming Untitled Jordan Peele project. How nice. But it's supposed to come out next year. So
yeah, there's a lot for Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll cover a Jordan Peele movie here. I've discussed Nope on a show before. Wouldn't mind discussing Get Out. Being in a biracial relationship, Get Out is definitely a movie I wouldn't mind touching.
Let's see. They were... So, let's see. I've got some trivia.
Okay.
The production was brought back to the Cabrini Green neighborhood where Candyman 1992 was filmed. Though the high-rise buildings have been long demolished, the row houses still exist. William Burke is seen reading the Clive Barker novel Weave World. William Burke being the guy who played Anthony.
No, William Burke was the guy in the laundromat.
Was he?
Yeah, William Burke was the guy in the laundromat.
Barker created the character of the Candyman in his short story, The Forbidden.
So yeah, when Anthony goes back to Cabrini Green, he's going through the row houses. the guy carrying his laundry, the guy carrying the bags that he helps out, that talks to him, that teaches him about Candyman, that's William Burke. Because if you look at the laundromat sign, it's Burke's Laundromat.
Jordan Peele was originally attached to direct the project early on in production before moving into producer's role. Nia DaCosta was hired as director and later became the first black female filmmaker to have a movie open at first place at the box office.
Shout out to her. We still got some black firsts coming out there, man. So history is happening. This is history live and in person.
The shadow puppets in the film used to convey the horrors of the racial violence bear a strong similarity to the work of the fine artist Kara Walker and her silhouette cutouts depicting racism and violence. Let's see. Any scripted use of the word B was intentionally misspelled as BEE as an in-joke amongst the production.
I can see that.
Was originally set to be released in 2020, the year that the previous installment, Candyman Day of the Dead, takes place.
I am unfamiliar with that one, so
I
have more research to do.
Yeah, me too. Library scene was blah blah blah. The third Candyman film to be released following the first Candyman of the same name and its 1995 sequel, Farewell to the Flesh. The third installment of the franchise, Day of the Dead, was released direct-to-video.
Explains that.
Containing the series of staple of the Caucasian blonde female protagonist, the librarian who aids Anthony is just that. However, the previous 3 films in the series featured this woman as the lead protagonist. It was the same lady. The character Boof was likely a reference to the character of the same name in the movie Teen Wolf. So that... Okay. That characterization, do we give it a star? Like, how do we feel?
I feel like it was the work was done too well. The progression of the story through the franchise, connecting the first Candyman to the second, the evolution in its own right of the Anthony McCoy character, from random baby who was kidnapped to the descendant, the future Candyman, the next man in line for that role, is fantastic. Showing the perspective of going insane, I think, was conveyed better in the second movie than the first, but still very well in the first, because Helen just lost it. And they didn't show her descending, just more so her in the space of madness.
How society reacts to her is profound and also accurate.
Yeah. And it goes to the fears and paranoias of that space, because there was no trust there. You couldn't trust anyone up from the outside, because everyone from the outside was too busy judging you on the inside, but there was no trust.
There was no trust. All right. So thank you for joining us for Candyman comparison. I think we have some homework to do 2 and 3.
Yeah, this franchise is far deeper than I thought it was before getting into all this. So there's definitely some, like, just for me, just there's definitely gonna be some more research and exploration into Candyman
Yeah.
while watching Joe Hendry and TNA.
All right. On Friday, we are tearing apart Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
There is tons to talk about. And the influence that he's had on culture as a whole, and all of that, I feel like we have a lot to cover. So, and then the following Monday, a week from now, I think the most Lovecraftian of stories was Stephen King's The Mist.
Okay.
So that is my vote for what we watch on Monday.
Okay.
Once we get through the Lovecraftian episode, I think you'll understand a little more.
Because I'm not from. I've been. A lot of people would like brought up reading Lovecraft, and I was not. That's a space that I'm still unfamiliar with. So this is going to be a really interesting episode for me. I'm going to be doing a lot more of the learning and doing a lot more listening and asking a lot of questions.
And that's going to be awesome. So if you haven't, thank you. Let me try that again. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. You are family.
It's 100 minutes you sat through.
How the heck are you?
How is West Virginia? Are you from West Virginia? Are you okay?
Are you anywhere in the country? Honestly, are you okay? Unclench your jaw. So, if you would like to see the stuff that we are doing, you might want to subscribe. And maybe even ring the bell as to whether or not you get notifications when we go live, in case you want to take part in the conversation. If you can't make it and you're watching this in post, no problem. Just pop down in the comments and let us know what you thought. And we will catch you guys next episode. Woo! Oh, jeez.